Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of the Dirty Side of the Grid podcast, where we've turned up late to qualifying because we're stuck behind Nikita Mazepin. I'm Yusuf and this is my co-host Mohammed, and this is our kind of review of this 2021 season. So having had a few weeks to kind of think about what happened, digest everything, what are your kind of thoughts on the season?
I'd say, I don't know, overall it was entertaining, as we all know, but it's been interesting knowing the result to look back and see, just in general, the hints of things happening and stuff. It's almost like looking back, you can see where the controversies were and where things started and how things worked out and the stories that ended up fizzling into nothing and then the ones that actually came through. So, I don't know, it's been nice to look at it as just the general development of everything as a whole.
Obviously disappointing since you're a Lewis fan.
It's annoying, but can't really do anything about it. Still waiting for Massey to get kicked out,
yeah.
But I guess that's not happening.
It's coming.
I hope it is. What do you think?
I think he has to get kicked out. They're gonna, Toto even came out, I think they're gonna get rid of the idea that the team bosses can talk to...
Oh yeah, that's going.
That's going, definitely. I think the idea of us listening to what's happening between the teams and the FIA or Michael Massey, I think that should go as well. Because I think that he's forced into, in the back of his mind, he's they can hear what's happening, so they're gonna judge.
Yeah.
So he does something.
They should bring back
I think that should go.
the driver briefings though. That was nice.
That was nice, yeah.
Sorry, I liked that sense of openness, but definitely during the race it should go. What did you think of the whole season though?
I think, overall as a season, it's probably the best season we've seen since, the one that comes to mind is 2010 maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
It's probably 2010 is the one that really comes to mind. Maybe 2012 as well. But over the course of 8-9 years, it's been dead. It's just been Mercedes domination. Literally, as I saw this stat this morning, in the past
Mm-hmm.
since this turbo hybrid era started, so 2014, Mercedes has taken 53 1-2s. Ferrari has taken 3 1-2s, P1, P2. Red Bull has taken 1, and McLaren has taken 1. So combine the 3 next teams are literally within 48 or something of them, or 49.
That is ridiculous. And you've got to remember, most of that would have ended after most of it would have ended after 2016, because after that Bottas wasn't exactly P2 material.
Yeah, but that's crazy.
That does show the domination.
The level of domination they had was insane. It's along the lines of the same thing that Red Bull had for those 4 years.
Yeah.
Where they just had such a good car.
But the main thing I guess is the on-track action. I'm sure we'll get into it in a bit, but the key difference between this year and the other years is that Max and Lewis were on the same part of the track for quite a lot.
In terms of, so the season started in Bahrain, so basically through pre-season testing it looked like Red Bull had the better car, they had better pace and everything, but it's always the case where Mercedes tend to be a bit slow or not as quick at testing.
Yeah,
as when they come.
I remember them trying to convince us that they were actually I think they were actually
this year there were
setup issues or something.
Exactly, yeah. This year they were trying to convince us that we actually don't have that great of a car.
No one believed them. They're oh no, we're actually slow this time, and everyone's yeah, shut up.
But so the race started with Max taking pole, and then it was kind of a standard race. Max led from the start. He went on. Basically, he was untouchable. As in he built a gap to Lewis, and then. You have to give it to Mercedes. I think this is one of the few times, over the course of the season, when you look at Mercedes' strategy, it was a bit shaky. You'd see glimpses of the Mercedes team, and then for a few races you'd just be what is happening?
Ferrari level.
Yeah, you're exactly what are you doing? But this time in Bahrain they did a great job where Lewis essentially stayed out. He undercut Max, and then he stayed out on the hard tires. And it was just it was an incredible race. I think if you're sitting at home watching, if you're a Lewis fan, you're incredibly scared because Max is going to catch Lewis. And this is the first time, I think, in a very long time, I think ever for Max, where he's hunting down Lewis because he is in a faster car, purely on pace, and he has the chance to actually just go overtake Lewis and win.
Yeah.
That was the first time I think ever that happened.
Because last time was Monaco, and that doesn't exactly count.
Yeah,
Really.
exactly. It was because Lewis was in like really old tires, but this time it was there was old tires, but he genuinely had the pace. And basically the only thing that happened really was he mistimed the overtake.
Yeah.
He overtook Lewis, but then he overtook Lewis when he was fully outside the track, and he had to give the position back. I think this is why you have to say this incident takes me back to what happened in Saudi. So in Bahrain, he gave back the position at a non-optimal point of the track where he could have had a few more corners.
Yeah.
And essentially what happened is Lewis was able to keep him behind for the rest of the race. There was no chance for him to have another go at Lewis. But with Saudi, that's why he wanted to give it back on the straight. So you get DRS. So essentially, he learned his lesson.
Yeah.
It's
definitely interesting to see the difference in those two.
Yeah, I think this is kind of where you see, like, after this race, you start to see Max kind of mature. And kind of like he's picking his moments when he has to pick an overtake. He is picking his moments. He's not going with he's not mistiming it like this. Like usually, like for instance, when you look back at Monaco, when he came to overtake, he overtook at a point where he couldn't really overtake. Bahrain, he lost a race. Well, he didn't. He came P2, but he lost a race because he did not time his overtake correctly. When you go into the later on in the season, he starts to kind of...
I'd say he's still not there, but there's definitely an improvement in that sense.
There is an improvement, though.
There's an improvement, yeah.
Kind of mentions of like people who performed well. Lando got P4, which is great. He's ahead of Perez, and obviously the one everyone was talking about was Yuki. Yuki had an incredible first race.
Oh, yeah.
He had a really, really good first race, and it kind of just went downhill from there.
The hype for Yuki was insane.
I think there was not a lot of hype before the season started, but at Bahrain he performed really well. He had a few good overtakes, and then everyone was like, oh, and then he just disappeared into the distance, and everyone's like, where did you go?
Yeah, on Twitter he was becoming almost one of the, Charles Lando. Not obviously to that level, but he was developing his like corner. I don't see them anymore. I don't know where they've gone. I don't know if they've turned into Gasly fans, but there was a lot of people trying to talk about how good he was in his junior career and stuff. And
he's a very good driver, but I think he obviously throughout the season you've seen he's matured. I think by the end of the season, like Abu Dhabi, he performed really well. Like he got, I think it was a P4, P5?
4, yeah.
P4. Which is very, very good. That's ahead of Gasly, ahead of Bottas. You have to give it to him, that's very good. But it's kind of very little, very late. So you kind of have to see next season what he does. I think next season against Gasly, you kind of see, because you have Gasly as a benchmark in the car. Is the car good? Is the car bad? Is the car very bad? So you kind of get a sense of how he's really doing. So Bahrain ended essentially with Hamilton leading, 25 points to 18. I think in the end, who got the fastest lap? Was it, I think it was Sergio? Yeah, I think they pitted him in the end to get the fastest lap. And then Italy. Do you remember Italy?
Italy. Oh yeah.
You have to remember Italy.
Yeah, I do.
Lewis took pole.
I was screaming, bro. I was so mad.
Lewis took pole, and then Max sent it into the first. So Lewis took pole.
Yeah.
And then in corner 1, 2, I think it's turn 3. Max just sent it.
I remember which one it is. I don't know what number.
I think it's turn 2, turn 3 maybe.
I haven't played all the games, so I don't know.
He overtook Lewis and just squeezed Lewis.
Yeah, this is the first sign of the.
This is
Verstappen. Well, I mean, we already knew he did this, but this was the first time he's done it in like a
championship kind of.
Yeah, when Lewis has a reason to fight him, because before it was always Lewis just giving him space because he knew that he didn't need to fight him.
Yeah, because he's gonna overtake him and just win the championship. I think this is where you kind of. This is my issue with Lewis is. He was too soft at the beginning. Like obviously you don't need to crash and get out, but you need to defend. Like he was defending, like his defense was very soft. Like he could have put up more of a battle in like a lot of these overtakes in the beginning of the season, but he didn't put as much as a fight. I think he didn't really put up a fight like as much when during overtaking, to like the last 3-4 races.
I'd say when he did put up a fight, I'd agree that he definitely gave Verstappen the benefit of the doubt and he moved out of the way and all of this stuff. I'd say this one he didn't really have much room to go, and it was wet, they were on inters. But in general, he definitely could have been more aggressive with Verstappen. But the problem is when he was and when he stood his ground, he got completely flamed for it. Like Silverstone was the first time I'd say he properly stood his ground. We'll get onto it later. But he got slated for that. He got...
But
you know, all
that
of the
was a
dodgy comments
difference-
from Red Bull, there was all that sort of stuff.
But that was a
and then same
different
thing in Monza
situation
as well.
from Monza was not his fault. Monza, I think
No, it
all
wasn't,
the
but
heat,
you could say he
all
stood
the
his
heat,
ground as well.
yeah, but all the heat was towards Red Bull at Monza because it wasn't his fault. But with Silverstone, I think it's a bit different because Cops is an incredibly fast corner. I think that's why there was the heat there, and it wasn't like, we'll get onto it later, but he didn't hit the apex. There were a few things he could have done better, but obviously, like him not hitting the apex came from like Verstappen going very like towards the right, so he couldn't, like if Lewis overtook him like at the very edge, he can't hit the apex.
We'll go on to it, yeah. So
Yeah, we'll get on to it a bit
turn,
later.
whatever, lap one of...
Yeah, so
Maybe
Verstappen
alright.
overtakes him, and this is kind of, I think this is the first time we've seen Verstappen have a chance to actually overtake Lewis and actually outpace him throughout the race. Lewis pitted, he was gaining on Max, he was doing really well, and then while overtaking a back marker, Lewis, I don't know why, he goes onto the wet patch from the dry.
I'm still pissed George didn't get out of the way.
And
It was
then-
George Russell, because I
and
remember
then-
this vividly.
And then he just went whee into the barrier.
George,
To be fair, he did get it out of the barrier. He
that
got
was,
it out of the gravel.
this was smart. People
He
didn't
brought
give him
it
credit
back.
for this.
He brought it back. He was racing. I think he was down to like P7 or something, and then from there he was very, very lucky. You have to say he's very lucky that George Russell sent it straight into Valtteri Bottas.
The timing of that
And-
incident was great.
Exactly, because red flag, changing the tires. He got to put a new like front wing on. He put on new tires, and the hunt was on. But this is one point. I think Lewis was complaining in Saudi that Verstappen got to change his tires under the red flag
Yeah, he complained about the
because
the
Lewis
red flag itself.
they pitted and then Verstappen got the free pit stop essentially, but Lewis got a free pit stop here. So I'm only bringing this up just to mention that it did balance out. There was the
Yeah.
whole rule of being able to change tires under the red flag. It generally balances out. I think the ones that are actually like doesn't really balance out is like the midfield teams, because it's kind of like depends on your luck really. And
Yeah.
like most of the time, like say someone like Lando, it just goes against him every time.
I have no issue with that rule personally.
Yeah. So after that, the hunt was on. Lewis managed to come back. He got P2 and then, which is, you have to give him, that was very good. It was a very good drive.
Solid. I'm still I think he admitted afterwards in an interview or something, but like obviously not at the time, but a bit after. It was a bit, I don't know, kind of desperate. Like almost he'd run out of patience. Normally he's very patient and blah blah and all of this. Well, there are a couple times in this season he's lost his patience. I'd say this was definitely the first one, where he just went. There was no reason. He didn't need to be that aggressive, but he did. He wasn't even aggressive with Max. He was trying to overtake George. I'm still annoyed, George. Like, there's a dry patch and a wet patch, and the blue flagged car is not moving to the wet patch. Obviously, George has no,
I think
there's nothing to say he has to do that.
It's the first
It's
corner,
just
but it's the
annoying me.
first corner. I think the blue flag was waved.
So yeah, so that would explain
So
why
he
George
still,
wouldn't
yeah,
exactly
he still
move
has a
out
few
the way
corners
and
to
all of it.
move out of the way. Obviously, it's not like a very good corner to move out of the way because you are screwing up your race
Yeah.
by moving out of the way. So I think he would have moved out of the way later on. But this is one thing where you kind of stop and think back, and you're like, Lewis from a few years ago would not have made this mistake.
Yeah.
This is kind of the start of the glimpse where when you go back and look at Lewis from say like 2014 to 2020, you kind of see Lewis as being incredibly consistent. Like Lewis is incredibly consistent. Obviously with Nico there were like incidents, but
Yeah.
but Lewis is generally very consistent. This was the first time where it wasn't an incident where he crashed with someone or anything. It was literally just his fault.
Yeah.
And I think this was the first time I've seen Lewis like throughout the season make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And it's not what you kind of expect from someone like him. because you don't expect him to kind of. He set the standard so high
Yeah.
that you're like, why did he do that?
It was weird. Yeah.
It's literally the blue
It's like
flags.
he-
Just wave. Like one more corner he would have, or two more corners. He's overtaken George, and he had the pace to overtake Max.
Yeah.
But I think like people you have to mention here is Lando. Lando defended against Lewis. Like at the very end, Lewis obviously overtook Charles,
Oh yeah.
and he came
yeah,
back. And Lando put up an incredible defense. He ended up getting P3, which I think he did. I wanted him to get P2 at the time. I thought he deserved it. But he put up an incredible defense, and he actually did really, really well. And like you can see, like the gap between Max and Lewis is like 22 seconds, and that mainly comes from like Lando holding him up. But in the end, like obviously the Mercedes had like way more pace.
Yeah, credit to him as well, Lewis. When he crashed into the barrier, he wasn't. So he bounces back off the barrier, whatever it is. The situation he's in is the tires are in the gravel. Actually, no, yeah, he stops just before the barrier, and the tires are in the gravel. So to stop himself from being stuck in the gravel, which he could have easily been, he moved his car forward, which is what broke his front wing, and he crashed himself into the barrier to keep his tyres out of the gravel, and that's how he got back out again. So that was, I don't know,
He
something
obviously
I
learned
noticed.
from China in 2008.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah, so when Lewis came out, he came out in 9th, and he was able to recover to 2nd. So overall, because Lewis took the fastest lap, Lewis was still, like, so up to 2nd race, Lewis is still in the lead of the championship. Going into Portugal, it's kind of like, it was a good race, but nothing really significant happened, I'd say.
Yeah, in the last like 3 episodes I've said I have no memory of this. I had to watch the things back and like see what happened.
Really?
Yeah, I fully just completely forgot what happened.
Yeah, so I think it was Lewis who took pole. Or Valtteri took pole from Lewis from Max. And then, oh wait, I forgot my notes, that's why.
Yeah, he's using
Yeah.
my laptop right now.
Okay, I had already done my
That's
notes,
smart.
but I forgot my laptop. Yeah, so on the first lap, Valtteri took pole, and then on the first lap, Lewis dropped Max over, took Lewis. And then basically, Lewis had to go on the whole hunt Max again. He did manage, the Mercedes obviously had the better pace. And so he was able to bring it back. He was able to win. So Lewis ended up winning. But it was kind of like it's a race you forget.
Yeah.
It's,
I think I
There's-
have the image of Lewis overtaking Bottas in my head because that was a decent move. I don't have the one of him overtaking Max.
yeah, but nothing really happened.
Where did Carlos finish? Just out of curiosity, because I forgot to mention in the last race.
Carlos finished P11.
Ah, okay, so
The only person who did really well here was Lando again, got P4. So like in the first few races, Lando got, I think it was P4, P3, P4, and you have to say, like, I think the first half of the season, like we'll see as we go on, Lando did really, really well.
yeah, it was easily the third best driver.
I think after the second, when you go into the second half of the season, I think McLaren lost a bit of performance, especially compared to Ferrari.
Yeah,
And then-
Ferrari had an upgrade. I'll mention that.
And then basically you kind of see McLaren drop. And I don't think it's his fault. I think it's just the car didn't give him what he needed.
There's that and like the 14 punctures I'll talk about as well. But in the last race as well, just to mention Emilio Romagna, is it Imola? Is it
Yeah,
Imola,
yeah.
right?
Emilia Romagna Grand Prix.
Sure,
Or
that
Imola.
one. Carlos spun his car like 4 times or something. If you remember, that's
Oh,
not
yeah,
he
yeah,
spun
I
loads,
forgot
but
to
he actually
mention.
he finished
P11.
5th still or something. No, not this one. The one before.
Yeah.
He still ended up finishing like he got a solid result to be fair to him. So
Yeah, he finished P11.
what?
Yeah, Italy, Emilio Romagna Grand
No, that's qualifying.
Prix. Is it? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
Apologies.
I was gonna say although.
Yeah, he finished
Where is
P5. P5.
Yeah, okay, there we go. I got it right. Where did he finish afterwards then? Wait, what was Portugal? So it was actually P11.
Yeah.
Okay, alright.
But we have to mention that up to this point, pretty much in the first few races, it was just Nikita Mazepin spinning everywhere.
Oh yeah.
How did you forget that? How did you
Every
forget-
time. I think he's.
How did you forget that? Literally, his like first 2 races in Formula One was just him going. Wee!
He crashed at the.
like Bahrain was just so funny. In his
He
first...
crashed in the first, like, turn 4 it was. Because I remember vividly, like, you know the image of the straight just before turn 4, and then Grosjean going off and having his accident.
Yeah.
Mazepin was last, and he spun off the other way. And I remember getting flashbacks, like seeing a Haas spinning off in the background. But it was just him
spun
spinning into
like
the barriers.
Yeah. He didn't. Did he hit into the barrier?
Yeah, I think he might. I can't remember if he retired, but it wasn't great from him.
No. I think he did retire because he didn't actually. He had to wait to finish a race until like his second or third race. Spain was actually an interesting race because Mercedes had like the edge, but Verstappen, what happened into turn 1, Lewis took pole into turn 1, Verstappen overtook him again.
Yeah, he did the thing again. He just ran really wide, and then Lewis had to back off to save his front wing.
Yeah, and basically, but from then on, Mercedes actually put like a very impressive, what was it? Yeah, so what happened was Spain, I'm trying to remember.
I think it was a 2-stop.
Yeah, it was a 2-stop. So
it was
they
the
did
Hungary 2019.
the Hungary 2019. So Lewis ran, and then he pitted at the very end, and he was 20 seconds behind Max. And he managed to get him with, obviously he was gaining like 2 seconds per lap. And he managed to, the overtaking then was very easy because Max was just on very, very, very old tires.
Yeah, they knew he had to.
But it was a good kind of strategy call. I think up to this point, strategy-wise, Mercedes have done really well. And you kind of like, yeah, Red Bull are putting up a fight, but I think up to this point, everyone's like, yeah, but Ferrari put up a fight. To this point, they're going to drop off. Mercedes is going to stay strong. This was kind of, up to this point, that was kind of the thought. Even I thought, like, up to this point, does Red Bull have the pace? I think with the next few races, everyone kind of changed their mind about it. Because for the next race, obviously in Spain, who else did well? Charles got P4, Carlos P7, Lando P8, Daniel P6. Daniel had like very bad races, as in like, you know, he yo-yoed between like bad, then he'd have like a good result, be like, I'm understanding the car, then he'd go like P15 the next race, be like...
Yeah, it wasn't even a bad result like a P9, he'd just go down to like P16 and disappear.
Yeah, you don't, like, this is the weird thing, because you can obviously the car has the pace, but where is it going? Like, it's like he's never driven a Formula 1 car before. I think my friend who listens to this podcast is a massive Daniel Ricciardo fan. He's gonna get very upset.
When did he start watching F1?
Last year.
So he even missed Pete Ricciardo.
Yeah, this is his first season watching. And I think I called him a Max Verstappen fan. And then I kept like we were talking about how Daniel Ricciardo was driving really badly. And he just messaged me, he's like, don't talk about Daniel like that. Don't you dare. He's a great driver. I was like, yeah, but no. His performances don't say that. You know? Monaco was the first race where...
Oh, God.
Monaco was actually a very interesting race. So Charles took pole, which was very unexpected.
Yeah.
Because this was the first race where you actually saw Ferrari had good pace with the tracks that had like slower corners. They generally had better pace. McLaren had the better pace at like the race tracks with like quicker corners, and like that's kind of like a general rule.
Yeah.
So he took pole. Charles took pole. Verstappen P2 and Carlos P3. Carlos was going on quite a good lap at the end, and then Charles sent it into the barrier, and like.
It's so unfortunate, you know, his record crashing at
Monaco. It's kind
crashing
of
at street tracks in general. I guess Baku as well.
Yeah,
it's rough for him.
It is kind of funny. That every time he's never finished a Monaco Grand Prix so far.
Yeah, that includes his junior career as well, which is an insane stat, because there was his junior career. Then Sauber, it wasn't his fault. His brakes failed. Then what else happened?
Ferrari, he crashed into the barrier.
What, in 2019?
No, in 2021.
Oh yeah, because there wasn't a race in 2020. I can't remember what happened in 2019, but he didn't finish.
I don't remember. So anyways, Charles crashed. He had an issue with his gearbox. On the formation lap, he had to retire the car, which is sad. I think if at least, I think he would have changed his gearbox. Is it 5 or 10 place? Good. 5. So realistically speaking, he might not have gotten pole, but he'd have gotten good points.
Yeah, and if they could recover his car, if he didn't crash or whatever, that's P1 in Monaco. You're basically gonna win.
Yeah, but I think they were like, oh, let's try and see if he can get if he can like use the car, but obviously there was an issue with the gearbox, and they ended up losing all the points, which I think is like, you know, if he breaks the curse, maybe then he'll be okay. But the curse still lives.
Charles Leclerc to win next year.
Monaco.
Yeah.
Sure, but this was the first. I think this was the first race where I saw Mercedes just completely off pace.
Yeah, they bottled it with both cars. Well, yeah.
Valtteri was okay. Valtteri wasn't.
No,
too bad.
well, what I mean by bottled it with Valtteri is different.
Yeah, so I think was it. So Valtteri, he was P3. So Valtteri was P3 for qualifying. Carlos was P4. And then wait, is this actually it's Monaco? I have to check.
That's qualifying as well.
Yeah. I know, I'm checking qualifying. So Valtteri started technically P2, and Carlos started technically P3, and then what happened was Lewis started like P7.
Yeah, Lewis was
completely off the pace. Now this is the surprising thing, that he's being outpaced by Valtteri Bottas. Like this is the point where you're like, something is very wrong. I think it's because, you know, what's her name? His physio didn't give him his drugs.
Angela
didn't
hand him
the drugs. Yeah. We spoke about this. Jos Verstappen thought Angela gave Lewis drugs. That's why he's performing very well. I don't get that.
Still
like,
ridiculous.
How would
Still
the
an
drugs
incredible
improve
claim.
him? Because the car is the one that, like, his reaction time obviously matters, but if he takes drugs, it's not gonna help him really. Anyways.
Bro, it's just part of the Red Bull media circus, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's awful behaviour, but
Moving on.
still off the pace, yeah.
Yeah, Lewis would end up finishing P7 after he was overcut by Gasly. He was stuck behind Gasly and he was overcut by Sebastian. Sebastian did perform really well this week.
He did, yeah. This was the start of him doing decent. There was
Yeah,
also
he
the Stroll
finished
clip
P5.
that was as Vettel came out the pits and they were all coming up the hill together. Lance Stroll
It was
crashed somewhere.
Gasly and Sebastian was side by side out of. And then
The
they
only
switched,
bit of action in the entire race.
And then they switched to Stroll coming out of the pits.
That became a big meme though, to be
Yeah.
fair. I saw like not just F1 Twitter meme, like that was a meme everywhere.
You
Like, I
know
saw
why it
multiple
happened?
media posts
Because
on
Formula One have basically their own crew
Oh, yeah.
that they're in charge of directing the races, but Monaco is the only race where they bring in their own team to do it, and you can tell they don't know what they're doing.
a rogue race director, you might say.
They
So-
don't know.
You
what
might
they're
call
doing.
him Michael Massey.
You don't know. They honestly have no clue what they're doing. But Max had like a clear,
so fucking stupid.
Max had clear pace from the beginning. He'd go on to win from P1, no trouble. Relaxed race for him. I think he took
Yeah.
like fastest lap as well.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Lewis just like, Lewis is just like sad, bro.
Yeah, I mean this was.
We
I'm
didn't-
not sure. Like, there's just no. We were never really given a reason
Yeah.
for the lack of pace. To be
Right,
honest. We just don't know what
I
happened.
think maybe he didn't get his drugs. That's why.
I mean, there were questions of. I'm assuming it's just the Mercedes setup. We saw this later on. Like,
But
they just-
Valtteri came P3, so
he didn't come P3 though, did he?
no.
Well, he
was
would have
P3 in
been.
qualifying. He would have been P3.
Until he
But essentially,
had the world's longest pit stop.
yeah, I think it lasted like what? They had to take the car back to the factory
So
to remove the tire from the car.
So it was like over 2 days. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But
Imagine it took 2 days for his pit stop to end.
it's so bad. But yeah, no.
He was
Yeah, to
performing
be
quite
fair
well.
to Bottas, yeah, he got the strategy right. I mean the
Even
setup right.
even his like pace. That's one weird thing, because I thought like they generally share like their setup
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Like with Nico and Lewis, they obviously did not share anything. That was highly competitive. But with Valtteri and Lewis, they do share this information. So I'm confused why Lewis didn't, like, if his car is that slow, why didn't he just go have a look and be like, so Valtteri, what have you done?
Yeah, it was weird. I'm pretty sure they even like to try and, because obviously there's rumors that Max gets the good chassis and then like Perez gets the shit one, or the bad one. So I think Mercedes at some point in the year, I can't remember where, they swapped the.
I think it was at Monaco. They swapped it at Monaco.
Was
So
actually
Lewis's chassis was doing well, and then they switched it at Monaco, and then Lewis was, and Valtteri did really well. So I think it was.
I
Monaco.
can't remember if it was Monaco, but
I think it was Monaco. This was the first time Max Verstappen ever took the lead of the World Championship.
oh yeah,
It was a big point for him. You have to say, like, taking the lead of the championship is
gives him a bit of hope. Yeah,
yeah. this is the
key
point
moment
where
in
I
the
think
career.
everyone was thinking like, yeah, Mercedes might not win this. Maybe
Yeah,
it wasn't
well-
a big doubt, but as in I think doubt started to kind of enter people's minds around Monaco. When you see Lewis in P7, you're like, okay, maybe there's something wrong. Maybe that the pace advantage isn't as big as it used to be. Obviously,
Yeah.
we know that like the whole technical regulations this year was mainly direct. Like they obviously won't say it, but it was directed at making Mercedes slower.
Yeah, completely. And it did affect the low rate cars and all of that conversation. But at the same time, you can't blame them for that. They've always done that. That's how it always is. They always change the regulations to slow down the fastest car to bring the rest of the field together. So,
But they literally, I think the only thing you can say is they didn't slow down all the cars. They just slowed down the Mercedes and gave Red Bull enough pace to enough of a kind of gap. So now they've reached and they possibly even surpassed Mercedes. But I think the reason like you kind of people are upset about it, or Mercedes are very upset about it, is not just because it was directed at their car, but it was directed at their aerodynamic philosophy. So now they did not understand, like, their understanding of how the car operated essentially changed.
yeah.
And this was the reason they had a lot of issues throughout the beginning of the season. The setup of the car was never, like, optimal. And it was because they didn't understand how the car is going to react. It took them, I think, to Brazil maybe or something, for them to really start extracting.
Yeah,
the
they
best
said the
from the
potential in the car, there was always speed in it, they just couldn't unlock it.
Yeah,
as well.
so I think that says a lot about like the idea of you want to make the front team slower, fair enough, but I think targeting exactly like how the car operates.
Yeah, sniping Mercedes isn't exactly the best way of going about it. But to be fair to I just really want to reword the sentence, but to be fair to the FIA, they couldn't go after Mercedes. Normally, their thing is the engine. That's what makes them so fast, blah, blah, blah. But you can't just change that again because the turbo hybrid era and all of this, the amount of investment that went into that engine, you can't just rewind that and say, let's go to a different engine really quick because Mercedes are too good. Like, you have
So
to
they had to
attack
target the
aero-wise.
aerodynamics.
Yeah.
But it's weird that they changed it for this year, considering next year the new regulations are coming in. Because
Yeah,
they could have
which
just been
was-
like, oh, okay, just leave it this year. And then next year, the new regulations are new is coming in and it's going to level the playing field. Because they only targeted, like, the only team that actually lost pace a lot was Mercedes. Obviously, Aston Martin lost pace, but then that's just because they copied
Yeah,
the Mercedes car.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it was literally called the pink Mercedes.
No, I remember that, but like, I was trying to think of other teams that have lost
No,
pace
that
already,
it's
considering
just,
it's just
it's
Mercedes.
just them.
Nice.
That's the one thing that maybe I didn't find fair is you're slowing the front team, fair enough, but you're not bringing, the whole idea is to bring the whole pack closer together, but the gap is massive. You
Yeah.
only the only thing you did is bring the first two close together, and then the gap between P1, P2 and everyone else is like, by the end of the race is like 20, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
That's literally the
Yeah.
average of like all the races, which I find to be insane.
Hopefully that's better next year. Yeah.
Yeah, I have high hopes. So Baku, so back to back. This is Charles Leclerc took pole again. So back to back poles.
So fast on street tracks, but then bottles it.
Yeah, but then the race starts, and everything just goes wrong for them. Max basically leads most of the race, until his tires decide to give up on him, and they give up on him at such a bad point of the track, because he could have easily, if he'd swung left and sort of swung right, he would be going into like the entrance of the pit stop. Not the pit stop, the pit entry.
Yeah.
And like obviously Stroll also had like tire blowout. See, the
Stroll
weird thing
had
is,
won a couple laps before or something.
yeah, the weird thing is there's no indication that something's gonna go wrong. The teams weren't running the tires over the recommended. It was just they just went off. Why? I think this was kind of the start of Pirelli's. Just this year has been like, I don't get them. Their tires have been bad this year. Like they should have gone like, I'm not sure which compound they got for this race, but they should have went for the highest compound. But if this is their highest compound and they can't even do the job, then you're like, what's wrong, bro?
Yeah, it's a
Like,
tough
you-
one for
you
them. These
need-
new
you need-
kind of tracks are weird for them because normally at a street race you bring the softest compound, but then here I'm assuming they must have used one of the middle ones, and then you give them the recommended life, but I guess so. I was listening to the Autosport podcast about this topic, and they said it's interesting because the engineers they've almost like forgotten about the possibility of a tyre blowing up. They'll like push the tyre to its limits. They'll go over the recommended like length, which to be fair, sometimes going over the recommended length is perfectly fine.
Ocon, yeah.
Ocon, there's no stop strategy, but like sometimes just going over by a couple laps or whatever, because you've been, I don't know, maybe you have an aggressive setup which is higher deg, maybe you have, if you've been working the tyres a lot throughout a stint, which you can't really measure in a certain, like specifically to the point of, as much as AWS want to give you the graphic, there's no Formula 1 game graphic to say the tyres are on 0%, they'll probably blow up now. It will just happen. So they were saying fair enough, blame Pirelli, but also consider the engineers trying to finesse the.
But I think
the
this
limits.
Baku was the case where the team wasn't running. Like Qatar, like Fernando ran over the recommended, I think. But here they didn't run over the recommended. It was
I
within.
think they went over by a couple. Not something major.
Yeah,
but they
like
were
if
told
you
not
go
to
over,
do like one stop, and they did a one stop.
If you go over, no, that was Qatar.
No, this one here as well.
Was it?
I think so.
Yeah, but
That's
like
what they said in the
even
podcast.
Stroll was within a few. Like he was about to pit. I remember he was about to pit. I think.
I
And
can't
then-
remember, but I have a feeling
then it
both of them
just
were
went-
doing the same thing. Like both of them were told, all of them were told don't do a one stop, and they ended up doing one stops and then going a bit over. Not saying they were the only people to do one stop.
But if the tire fails within like 2-3 laps or something like that of you going over the recommended limit, the recommended limit is supposed to be on the lower side. So even if you go over a few laps, you're okay.
Yeah, the recommended shouldn't be the tyre will blow up now. It should be like
The fact that
take
like
it this long.
it should be the recommended life, but after this point you lose a lot of pace. It's not
Yeah,
you go into a tire blowout and you're gonna die.
But then I guess at the same time you gotta say it varies so much between each car. The recommended for
but
Pirelli is like, the same way that Pirelli is saying, whatever they say this and that, but they're using their tire data, not specific Mercedes data or specific Red Bull
Yeah,
data.
but that's the you're giving an overall kind of
It's an estimate.
this much. Yeah, but like if I go like 2 laps over and my tire blows out, are you joking? Like I literally went two laps over, and
Yeah.
this is not a track where it's like a highly aggressive. Like you think of other tracks when you think of like highly aggressive on the tires, you don't necessarily think Baku.
No, yeah, you don't, to be fair.
Like they don't have like the weird curves. They don't have like a. It's not like you don't think about it that way.
Yeah, it's not like Silverstone. Silverstone, I'd say, is.
Yeah.
And
So
Spain, I guess.
Qatar as well.
Yeah.
But you don't think of this. Saudi, you can add Saudi to this. So, yeah, I find like Pirelli has been a bit weird here. But Max ends up in a barrier. We have a red flag. Lewis starts. And Lewis, see, I was telling you, Lewis has mistakes. This is the biggest mistake of the season.
Yeah.
This is
So
where Lewis,
painful.
he could have won, and he would have gained 25 points on Max Verstappen. And then he goes and presses a button that screws up his brake balance, and he has no front. I think he has no brakes at the front, something like that. And he ends up just going straight ahead. Perez wins his first race. I think up to this point, Perez has been a bit iffy, to be honest. He's not
True,
performing
yeah, I
very
think
well.
there were questions there, right?
But he wins here. I think this gives him a bit of comfort if you can relax. Because he's been performing kind of like you'd say Gasly was performing. He's a long way off Max. Or Albon was performing, a long way off Max. But I think the difference is he got a win early on. And I think that gave him the comfort of he can win in this car. But obviously there's a very big gap between them. And there's
Even
also the
running
fact
P2
that
was
with Red
decent.
Bull this year, they blatantly preferred Verstappen. They're like, Verstappen's going to win the championship, you're second driver. With Albon and Gasly, it wasn't as clear. So
He was still the favourite, but there was no championship there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why it's kind of surprises me. Like,
I don't know, I say he did alright, and I definitely remember at some point they had an interview with either him or Christian Horner saying Perez, I can't remember when his contract was signed, I might have to look this up, but
it was in Abu Dhabi.
no,
No, it wasn't. He signed
next
it.
year.
He signed it. It was signed
he
in
signed
Abu
a
Dhabi.
2-year deal.
No, like it was the 1 year one. I think he signed.
Yeah, but I'm saying for next year, for this year now
yeah.
coming. Yeah, I know that it was right at the end of the season he got his Red Bull contract, but at some point through the mid-season here, he got his contract for 2023, which at the time, you could almost argue wasn't justified, purely because based on his performances, he wasn't anything special compared to Gasly and Albon. But he definitely proved himself in the second half of the season, which he said also gave him confidence.
I don't think I think the reason he's got a contract, I think is because he's won in the Red Bull, and because of Turkey and the last race.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he got the contract.
No, he got that. Like, if you look back and you're like, why did he get a contract?
Yeah.
I think holding up Lewis at those two races really actually contributed to Max's win.
Yeah.
So you can, like, if they sit now and they're like, do you actually want to have him, or do you want to just fire him and get a new guy in? They'll be like, no, he actually helped Max to the championship. So next year he could do that again.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's not consistent enough for them to win the constructors.
Yeah,
his
qualifying needs to be way better.
And even his race pace, like, he just, like, at Silverstone, he just dropped back and then he went nuts. Anyways, so after Baku, Lewis screwed up.
I'm still so quick, because the worst part is, like, he always, if you watch Lewis on a race start, his one hand is obviously holding the steering wheel like a normal person, because he needs the upshift. The upshift thing is with his paddle shifts like normal with his fingers, middle finger behind the steering wheel, and then his other hand, it's always like it wasn't a weird position for him. He always puts it on top of the steering wheel, but for whatever reason the button is there as well, and it was completely exposed. And yeah, he presses the button for whatever reason, makes a mistake, awful, and then they said afterwards that the button's still there, but they changed it so it's not as
no. There's
easy
a
to press
cover
by
on
mistake.
top. There's a cover on top, so you can't press it accidentally. What's his name? Sebastian gets his first podium.
Oh, was this it?
Yeah, and Gasly gets his podium of the year as well.
Oh yeah, Gasly.
So I think Sebastian actually proved himself. I think, like, he went in a car that was arguably like the 7th best car, and he got 2 podiums.
Yeah.
And he actually scored quite well. I think he's.
Is that 2 including Hungary?
Yeah, I count that as a podium.
Count that as well.
Yeah, I don't care what they say. You know, the only reason they actually, we're gonna get to that. Bro. I know the science behind it, but it's just it doesn't make sense. Anyways, from France onwards, like, I don't think there's really much to talk about. France, Syria, and Austria. France, there was a bit of kind of. Red Bull did exactly what Mercedes did in Spain and Hungary, all the way back to them. So Max pitted for, like, tires, and he just came at Lewis. Valtteri could not do anything because his Valtteri couldn't defend for his life. Defend like a lion. It's Valtteri Bottas, bro.
I got 3 points from this race. The first one is, at the start, we were told if someone cuts the corner or cuts the chicane or whatever it is, they have to go around the bollard. Max does that. He doesn't go around the bollard. No mention of it. Mercedes obviously didn't complain. No one said anything. I think they said afterwards that it's because he cut a different part of the corner, which, to me, like, I'm not saying he should have got a penalty for that, but it's just to, like, completely skip past your own rules is a bit weird. The second thing is, the reason he came out alongside Lewis after his pit stop, Anthony Davidson, which is why the reason Paul di Resta should be nowhere near a Sky Pad is because Ant does the job way better. He analysed how Lewis lost all his time, because in theory he shouldn't have been undercut by Verstappen. It was the angle of the pit entry, which is completely insane to think about. But, like, yeah, he said he lost 8/10 purely driving around to get the angle into the pit lane, which was weird. And then the last one here, you can see the image, you viewers can't, but Lewis, when he was being overtaken by Verstappen right at the end, he didn't defend.
Yeah, Lewis didn't defend at all.
It was weird. He didn't even move to the inside. He just stayed there. Like.
Yeah, that was a bit surprising. I think at that point Max had way more pace, but Lewis could have put up a fight.
Yeah, like he was obviously going to lose, but, like, he didn't even.
Yeah, he didn't
make it hard.
But this is why I say when Lewis isn't very aggressive with his defense. Like, Max is not gonna give up that position. If he's on old tires, he's not gonna let you pass unless, like, he's gonna make you work for it.
Yeah.
Lewis doesn't do that, and I think this is kind of the disappointing part where you have, like, you want 2 people who are dying to win, or, like, who are really going for it, whereas Lewis is always like. Like, defend, bro. Like, what's wrong with you?
Weirdly, that does sum him up until Brazil, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, I think up to this point, I think up to Styria, you can kind of say that the FIA have been okay. They've not done anything major in terms of their like the cancelling. Like I think they cancelled for Lando. He was on a podium somewhere like P2, P3, and they cancelled. I think this was Styria actually. They cancelled his lap because of track limits.
Oh, okay.
Generally, they were up to this point. It was okay, where they weren't too kind of. They haven't done anything bad to this point. I think you have to mention that.
Yeah, I don't think there was much conversation about the FIA at this point.
Yeah, Max extends his lead in France he extends it to 131 to 119, and then Styria and Austria. There's really nothing to talk about.
I've also forgotten these two races as well. To be
it was the case. It was a triple header where it was obvious that Mercedes did not understand how their car worked, and they were going into it and kind of hoping for the best, but they knew that it's gonna be painful, and we just have to kind of get it over with and then go back to the drawing board.
So Austria and Styria, for people who've forgotten, Styria is in Austria, and the track is called Spielberg. It's the Red Bull Ring. And Mercedes are horrible at it because it's the second highest, I think, in altitude.
Yeah,
behind
Mexico is the highest.
And also, Mercedes are horrible with the curves there as well.
The one thing that can be mentioned from like the two races is Lando got his second podium in the second race, so that's the Austrian GP. I don't like the idea of having to like a triple header is nice, but if you have like. Say France and Austria, they're not exactly similar races. France is boring as hell.
Yeah.
And I literally in my notes I had boring for 3 races. But
I think people in the conversation though they found France interesting.
No, France is boring.
France is normally boring, but I'd say this year it wasn't too bad.
Boring. France is boring. France is like Monaco. Both of them are just dead.
Yeah, normally.
Austria, like Lando got obviously a podium there. He was doing really, really well with the car. I think he qualified P2 in Austria, and he nearly got Verstappen at the very end. I think Verstappen got by like some hundredth of a second. Like I think it was like 1/100.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he was so close to getting pole.
It was a very, very small.
Yeah.
But I think up to this point, Lando was third in the championship up to this point. Like he's doing a great job. Obviously, I don't like the idea of having, like in a triple header, the same race twice.
The same race twice in any context.
Yeah, across the season is I think having like if a race is cancelled, they obviously don't want to have like they don't want to cancel a race, but you can't go and be like, oh no, we're just gonna have like a triple header with Styria and Austria. It's the same track.
Yes.
Like I get it in like in a track where say France for instance, you can actually change the layout.
Yeah, changing the layout was debatable, but it was fine because like it was
it's not the same track. It's not the same track. I think they can do that in like you can talk Bahrain. They can change it a bit.
That's the one I was thinking of.
So you can say okay, yeah, like doing it in Bahrain is good because you have a different track.
In the context of COVID, purely if a race is getting cancelled.
But you can't go to Styria and Austria, and it's the same track. Like they raced twice at the same exact track. Obviously the result's gonna be. I don't think that was fair for Mercedes. I don't think that was fair for anyone really. But like as in Mercedes especially, for the championship, I don't think like. You saw what happened in kind of Styria. You saw how Max dominated, and like watching the Austrian GP, you're just like so high. Like it was literally like Lewis is gonna lose this race. It's fairly obvious. I think with the Austrian one, Max won by like 20 seconds. It was pure domination. So by the end of Austria, Max was 182 points and Lewis was 150. So there was quite a big gap. I think 32 points.
Conversation now was Max is gonna win this easily.
Yeah, this is where I think like I was saying like up to the triple header with Monaco there was a bit of Baku a bit of, but it was close. It was 5 points or 4 points.
Yeah.
After the triple header, it was the case that it's now Max Verstappen's championship to lose. I think it had shifted from the idea that it was Max Verstappen's championship and Lewis is the kind of hunter for the championship. Yeah. As opposed to it was the opposite. Silverstone was Silverstone is the first kind of major incident. So they raced wheel to wheel throughout the season. Max had given up. Lewis had given kind of position every time. He'd given up. This was the first time where Lewis, I think he he went out on track and he did not give up the position.
Yeah.
The reason he did that was obviously he took pole. In the sprint race, Max overtook him at the beginning, and this is the weird part because Lewis this year, the amount of times he got pole and he's lost the position just in the first half of the season.
Yeah,
he's done it like four times, which is very, very surprising. And that obviously throughout the sprint race we saw Max built up like a 2-second gap and he was comfortable ahead. There was no Lewis wasn't really, because Lewis I think was quicker on the first and last sector, but in the second sector Max would build up enough of a gap that Lewis couldn't hurt him by the time they got up to the third sector, because it's the twisty part of the track. But in terms of the accident, I think Lewis is more to blame for it. I think Max goes onto the inside, he blocks Lewis's kind of access to the inside going into cups. Lewis goes fully on the inside, and then obviously Lewis can't hit the apex. But I think like at that point Lewis was fairly alongside him. So you think my thought process is like, you have to give the other driver enough space. See, this is where the argument of they change the rules a bit from you have to give the other drivers enough space to if it's your corner, do whatever you want.
Yeah, that conversation is so weird. I can never keep up with that one.
So I think it has to be the case where you have to give the other driver space. You can't just like Max has done it a few times this year. Lewis did it in Monza where he just squeezed him out. Max did it a few times this year. Like he did it way more. You have to give the other driver space. You can't just squeeze him out. This is what happened literally. It was Max. Max was obviously a bit ahead. Like Lewis got up to him, and then going into the braking zone, Max was a bit ahead, and then Max should have given Lewis the space.
Which one were
in Silverstone. And then what happened is Max hit, and obviously like he crashed. It was like 51 Gs, incredibly big crash. I think the way Red Bull dramatized it afterwards, and like I did not like that. I did not like the way they portrayed it, because then they made it seem like, oh my god, like Lewis didn't know obviously like what happened. He's celebrating the 8th time he's won his home Grand Prix, so obviously he's gonna be really happy.
I'm pretty sure.
He's obviously gonna be really happy. You can say like his celebration was a bit like overboard, fair enough, but he didn't know at that point. He was told Verstappen's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So
as far as he knows, Verstappen's fine. So.
I do understand that point. I don't like the comments, like the Max comments, the Jos comments, the helmet comments, all the Christian coming out was like, that's a technical foul. Well, you don't know what a technical foul is. You've never driven a car.
He wasn't fast enough to get into Formula 1.
I know.
That's the unrelated one. That is our unrelated link of the day. I'm sure we'll probably come up with a few others. But Martin Brundle doing, I think it was his grid walk, but for whatever reason he's talking to Christian Horner.
Oh.
And I think it's the first ever Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
Yeah.
If I'm making this up, then I'm making this up and I've forgotten.
No, it's true.
I think it's the first ever Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And Horner has a little dig at Martin, just like completely unrelated, shame you didn't get to drive this or something like this, whatever it was. And then Brundle just comes in. I'm not even going to say what he said. But like, just watch the clip. It's probably only 20 seconds, but it's definitely worth the watch.
He roasts Christian so bad.
Brundle's just so funny. He's a legend. He's a legend. But
Lewis gets a 10-second penalty. Charles leads basically like 50 laps of the race, and then
Charles, man.
on lap 50, Lewis overtakes him. You can see the difference between his defense and Max's defense. Charles goes out and gives Lewis enough space to make the corner.
Yeah.
Obviously, he goes out and then comes back in. He loses position.
He gets a bit of oversteer. He has to go wide. But also, to be fair, you do have to mention Lewis was a lot more cautious that time.
But the difference is Lewis was not as far inside, because Charles from the beginning gave him enough space, whereas Max closed off the inside, so Lewis had to go all the way to... Lewis knew obviously that if I don't overtake Max here, I've lost the race.
Yeah.
From the sprint race. So he knew he had to overtake, and he goes to the inside, and then I think it was... I personally think like Max should have given more space, but Lewis should not have gone like... He obviously saw Max is not going to give the space. Based on the rules, it was like fairly Max's corner, so he should have slowed down a bit. Especially going into like cops, it's like so quick, you kind of have to be a bit more cautious.
Yeah, he should have been a bit more cautious. And I think what would have been interesting is if Lewis was on the outside and he, somehow, because if he was on the outside, I'm pretty sure Max would have either overshot the corner.
Oh, he would definitely.
Like, he would have been ahead. And what I mean by overshot the corner is, and he just steams off and then goes on the runoff and then keeps the position.
That's
rather
why he
than
always
crashing
does.
into him.
See,
But, I don't know. It would have been interesting if they made contact, but Max was on the inside. That conversation would have been interesting.
I don't, like, Max, Max keeps doing, like, if it was the other way around, Max would have pushed Lewis all the way off track and Lewis would have given him position and gone all the way off track. This is what Max has been doing all season long, where whenever he's fighting with Lewis, he just pushed Lewis completely off track and just go ahead.
Yeah.
And that annoys me, that really annoys me, because it's not like, for instance, when you look Fernando against Lewis at Hungary, he defended really well and he defended Lewis complained, but Lewis obviously there was nothing to really complain about. But as in, like, when you look at, like, Abu Dhabi and, like, Perez defending against Lewis, defended incredibly well. But Verstappen's defense is just push him off track. Like, I think if he does that, I think he generally has to get a penalty.
Yeah, I'm so annoyed that, well, when we get onto Monza, we'll get onto Monza, but just in general, like, I hate this culture of, also, yeah, we need to mention in stereo, people driving off at turn 5, the long right-hander, bottom of the hill after the second DRS zone. Perez was shoved off by Lando gets 5 seconds. Perez then shoves, I think, 2 other drivers
Gets
off.
10 seconds.
And gets 5 seconds for each penalty as well. Obviously, this was onto grass and onto gravel, but you could argue that corner, like, what do you expect? You're being run out. I mean, that's what people say. I still think you should give a car's width, and
but
I don't know, it's just the rule of not giving room is so annoying. And
I think you have to give
I think you have to give room.
But at the same time, I think if you're going into the corner, like, I think with Lando, he was already so far ahead that, and then Perez is just kind of like late braking and just going wee, like, it's his corner, and then they basically gave him a penalty. So I don't necessarily agree with that one, but the Perez one, I don't agree with what they did, but at least they were consistent across the board. If you did this, you're getting a penalty. After Silverstone, this is when the FIA just went crazy. Honestly, like, at this point, so Lewis got a 10-second penalty, he won. The whole incident was Lewis essentially won, he should have gotten a harsher penalty.
The key thing about this as well is he was given the penalty mid-race. It's not he won the race, then got given a penalty that kept him first. He was given the penalty, and then he went back and overtook Leclerc right at the end of the win.
I think people are just, like, they're just, like, they didn't want Lewis to win.
Yeah, they just took the 51G to heart. They're like, oh, he's in hospital. And the Red Bull media circus was mad, obviously. So Horner's comparing racial abuse to just general abuse Max gets, which is ridiculous because every driver gets abuse. Sure, some get more than others. But racial abuse is something that only Lewis gets, and it's in a different category. Like, if you want to accuse them of bad driving and all of this and abuse them, all abuse is wrong. But if you're going to say that, you're criticising their driving. How are you going to, so you're just going to call him a nigger and get away with it? Like, what's that to do with the driving, realistically? So, I'd say it's ridiculous. Max was also, if you look at the tweet Max put out after Silverstone, and then the tweet Lewis put out after Monza, they're very different. And it just, I don't know, you can tell subtly, like, the differences. Obviously, Lewis is more mature, he's older and all of that, but it's just, surely Red Bull's got a team of PR people that help Max run his Twitter and stuff like that.
I think Red Bull's, they've always, like, Mercedes are a lot more kind of mature. Red Bull are just a bunch of kids. Like, whenever they don't get to go in the way, they're like, ah! They cry about it, like, literally. The point, they recreated it. They got Albon to go on track and recreate it.
Yeah.
Like, are you crazy? It's over. The race is over. Move on. Like, that annoyed me so much to the point where they did this. Hungary was a joke. I think Hungary was like a joke. So basically, what happened is Valtteri smacks into Lando, and Lando is forced to hit Verstappen. Verstappen has damage. Verstappen ends up finishing barely P9. Like, he was slow, as in, like, he's back with the Haas slow. Like, he was terribly slow. And we see this incredible picture of one car on the starting grid. That's just fun.
My heart sank when I saw this. I was like, this is so annoying, but the picture was hard. Like, I hated seeing it, but the picture was sick.
Yeah, so Lewis starts on intermediates, everyone else stops for dry tires. Lewis ends up stopping the first lap, and he ends up dropping a few positions. He overtakes everyone, gets to Fernando, and he can't overtake Fernando. He's stuck
Yeah.
behind Fernando for like, what, 8, 9 laps?
Something like that, yeah.
And then by the time, the funny thing is, by the time he overtakes Fernando, he's still gaining on the Ocon by like 2 seconds a lap.
Yeah, so he was. Where did he finish in? If you get the result of where
He finished, so it was Ocon, Sebastian, Carlos, and then Lewis. He does manage to pass Carlos.
Does he?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he does.
But
Yeah,
he doesn't
was
pass.
right behind him.
He doesn't. He would have gotten to pass Sebastian and Ocon, but he
Yeah,
ran
so-
out of time because of Fernando.
If he had Fernando in 2 laps or something,
But-
he definitely had more than enough time to get the other
But
two.
this is the incredible point where you're like, Fernando's defense was amazing.
Yeah.
But then Lewis is also, the surprising thing is Lewis was doing lap in lap out the exact same thing, whereas the only time he actually changed, like his attitude going into turn 1, he made Fernando essentially like he didn't get a good exit, and so Lewis was able to overtake him later on.
Yeah.
But essentially, for like Fernando even commented on this. He's like, Lewis kept doing the same thing for so long. I was confused that he didn't change his attitude, like what he's doing, because you'd think he'd do something a bit different. He didn't. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, he changed his style into the last corner and then into the first corner.
Yeah,
to
but that
allow
lost him
him
the race.
and all of that stuff. It did, yeah, and obviously, good old Fernando was going on about it, like, oh, it's so bad and all of this, and you know, he should have been better. He should have got past me. It was easy, but obviously, once again, we mentioned that. To be fair to them, they were in first place, so Mercedes had to make the call, but every single other team made the right decision, and they were the
Except
only people who made the wrong call. So
And at the
not
end of
great
kind
for
of the mid-season, Lewis actually takes the lead of the championship. I think up to this point, you can fairly say that Max actually deserves the lead of the championship. Up to this point, I don't think Max hadn't done like a lot of shoving off track yet. He hadn't. It was fairly clean to this point, other than Silverstone, which I think is mostly Hamilton's fault. It was, you can kind of say, Verstappen deserved it. The only reason Lewis is leading is because Max DNF 2 races in a row. Because
oh
of
yeah,
a
you
Mercedes.
forgot about Bottas bowling. Yeah.
No, I said that's the first
Oh,
thing
you
I
mentioned.
said.
Oh, okay.
That's literally the first thing I mentioned about the race. Literally, he smacked full into it. Now, yes, Hungary. The one thing I wanted to talk about Hungary. So, Verstappen deserved to lead at this point. He was doing incredibly. The second thing to comment on, Sebastian got disqualified because he didn't have a liter in his car. Now, the reason they used to do that is they actually, like in the 70s and 80s, I don't remember when, they actually needed a liter of fuel to analyze if you were cheating or not. Nowadays, they don't need a liter of fuel, but the rule just applies for absolutely no. They're like, you have to have a liter in the car, but you don't need a liter for testing. I think they had like half a liter or something.
Yeah, they had
But
a certain amount,
yeah,
but it
so-
wasn't enough.
So what happened, the issue was, they can prove through their telemetry data and all of everything like that, that they actually did not use that last liter. It was in the engine, but they couldn't get it out. So they hadn't used it, but essentially the fuel was stuck, they couldn't get it out, and so they were disqualified. I just found that so bizarre, because there's like, in the tank there's like half a liter or something. They're like, no, you need a liter, but you don't need a liter to do your tests. You
They-
used to. It's fair enough if you used to need a liter. Fair enough, yeah, disqualify a guy on that because you can't prove he's not cheating. With the technology you have today, you don't need a liter. So I just
Maybe
find
the
that
rules do need updating. To be fair,
I find that so bizarre that they're actually disqualifying people for something as stupid as that.
I guess if you're sticking to the regulations, fair enough. But why are the regulations like that?
Exactly. This is why I think the regulations need fair. Like obviously the rule was set in like I don't know when, and there's never been an issue with it. But like you need to like stop every few years, look at the regulations, be like, do we need a liter of fuel? No,
Definitely, yeah.
we only need half a liter of okay, you only need half a liter of fuel in the car. Why force the teams to have 1 liter when you don't need a liter? Because that actually affects the racing. If you have like an extra half a liter of fuel, you could push a bit more on the lap. You don't have to gonna dial down your engine.
Yeah.
But by the end, people are dialing down their engines to save fuel. But realistically, if you have an extra half a liter, you can say push, I don't know, on 1 lap, say. So it's kind of counterintuitive towards the racing aspect. Because you don't need that much. You need what, 0.1 of a liter?
It's sad to see. I'm glad. I'm just glad Vettel could celebrate on the podium. That was nice. But obviously, it was taken away from him afterwards. But you could actually say as well that's a more points gifted for Lewis.
Yeah,
Because he
so
came
Lewis,
third, but he got
yeah.
promoted to second, so that was lucky for him. And just worth mentioning, I think we're gonna have to do this in 2 parts. Just to mention the regulations while we're here. I actually had a look at the ones about the racing. Someone did an article on it because I was interested to see what the rule is about, you know, cars on the inside, cars on the outside, who gives the room, who owns the corner, and all of that stuff. The rules are pretty much just exactly what you've heard. So you're not allowed to move twice, weaving and stuff in front of the car on the straights. You're not allowed to move late to like block someone, which was the Verstappen move. Like, I think that was introduced in like 2016, 17 or something. Like, if you move really late, just before you're about to brake.
Doing that, yeah.
So he'd move somewhere, he'd defend the inside. The other guy would get ready to either move further to the inside or to the outside. He'd wait until they made their decision and then block them. And then the other guy would have to brake and all of this. It caused a lot of arguments. That was removed, so that's now a rule against that. If you're in the braking zone, so think Monza 2019, Lewis and what's his name, Charles, you have to leave a car's width. If the car's significantly alongside, I think it's front wing to rear tyre or whatever it is, you have to leave at least a car's width. There's also, I'm going to have to link these as well. I don't know if I can find it. Vettel and Alonso in 2010 and 2012 or something.
Oh, and
they went Curva Grande in Italy.
Oh, no.
It's turn 3. They go side by side, and it's just really interesting. I'll link it. I'll try to link it.
There is, like, if you go back to, I think it's 2012 when I think it's Sebastian overtakes Fernando at Silverstone. Same corner as Lewis, Cobb's corner. And the overtakes, because Fernando gives a bit more space, the overtake's way cleaner. But because Max doesn't give space, that's the cause of basically that. So I think in Monza, Lewis did the same thing. But
and just to bring the last one, there's basically no regulation past. Like on the exit of the corner, I don't think there's. I'd have to refresh my mind on the article.
I think even
there's basically no talk about the exit.
I think even Nico came out and said that the regulations need to be changed. Like, they need to look at the regulations and kind of they need to update the regulations. He says that the regulations must be tightened, and I think that's necessary with like what we're seeing at the end of the season when the battle was getting heated.
Yeah.
I think all of it needs to change. Not necessarily change,
I'm on board with that now.
but I think it needs to be clarified. I think the idea of you have to leave a car's width going in, the idea that you're ahead so you do whatever you want, I think that makes no sense.
Yeah.
I think you have to give a car's width. But yeah, I think the regulations need to be clarified.
Yeah, it's like they're purposefully vague to allow for all sorts of situations, because racing, you can't mediate everything. But at the same time, I don't know if people.
But overtaking is such an easy thing, because overtaking, like, I get like the say red flag, you can change the tires and stuff, because it doesn't happen as much, so you can't govern stuff like this. But with the overtaking, you get how many overtakes throughout the year?
Like 50 a race or something.
A funny thing is, in Bahrain, Sebastian crashed into the back of someone. I don't remember who. Who did he crash into? Ocon. So the funny thing is, after he crashed, he actually went past him, and that was counted towards his overtaking.
Oh, I saw this. Yeah. That's ridiculous.
That is the funniest thing I have read pretty much all week. But yeah, we'll link as like a throwback from the past. We'll link 2 videos this week. The Sebastian overtaking Fernando into Cops, and Martin Brundle just roasting Christian Horner. Yes. I think we'll end it here.
Yeah, we'll have to do a part 2 for the second half of the season. So that brings us up to the winter break, and then we'll
the summer break. That's exactly what me saying instead of dirty side of the grid.
That brings us to the summer break, and then I'll take it to the winter break with everything between Spa and Abu Dhabi.
Anyways, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.